Now, it's Rosacea Awareness Month in April, and I was conscious that I haven't done as much content around rosacea as I have around things like acne and pigmentation. So today's video is devoted to the 8 things I want everyone who has rosacea to know. And I'm talking about myself here. I definitely have a tendency to rosacea, as many people do. So in today's video, I hope I give you little nuggets that you can take away that are practical, useful, and help you feel enlightened and empowered so you can manage your rosacea better than before. The most important thing is to recognize that you're not alone. As many as 10% in the UK and 10% in the US will have a diagnosis of rosacea. It just might not be so obvious because there are different types of rosacea. So I have the erythema-telangiectatic rosacea, or ETR, which basically means I have a long flush and a few little broken capillaries, but that isn't always that visible on my skin. However, someone with the papulopustular type of acne will have, particularly when they have a flare-up, more obvious evidence of disease with spots, which are the red papules, and whiteheads, which are the red pustules with little white heads on them, in the mid-face, typically over the nose and cheeks. And then there's a more rare type called rhinophyma, where there's thickening and fibrosis of the skin, again, most typically seen on the nose and more common in men. So different ways of presenting in the skin, but all the same condition and terribly common. The next thing to know about rosacea is it doesn't just affect your skin. As many as 40% of people will experience what's known as ocular rosacea, where it affects the eyes, leading to redness, a gritty sensation like you've got foreign objects in your eyes, and the tear film can be affected too. So if you've had any issues with your eyes when using your computer, for example, and staring at the screen for long periods of time, do consider whether or not rosacea is also affecting your eyes. Now, one of the most misleading things about rosacea is use of the term acne rosacea, which makes people think that it has something to do with acne vulgaris, which is a disease of teens that can progress into adulthood that we associate with T-zone activity, blemishes, blocked pores, blackheads and whiteheads, and potentially inflammatory lesions that scar. So acne and rosacea have nothing in common other than the presence of papules and pustules. Rosacea is a purely inflammatory disorder without comedones, that's really key, and the distribution is different. So it's mid-face, whereas acne is either T-zone or along the jaw or body. So important to make that distinction. They can coexist because common diseases are common, but they don't have any relationship to each other. Now, on that theme, rosacea being common can coexist with other skin diseases. So one of the commonest situations that we see rosacea being incorrectly treated is when the redness leads to a diagnosis of something called seborrhoeic dermatitis, which is a type of eczema that can affect the skin creases around the nose and also potentially the eyebrows, scalp, behind the ears, and so forth, the areas where we have sebaceous glands. So important to make the distinction, because the wrong treatment, where we use topical steroids to potentially treat seborrhoeic dermatitis, can aggravate rosacea. So it's why making the right diagnosis in the context of the red face is so important. If you have overlap, however, there are better suited creams to tackle the seborrhoeic dermatitis than topical steroids. We now have the calcineurin inhibitors, a group of drugs that include Elidel and Protopic, which tend to be less prone to causing a rosacea flare. But if ever there was an instance where it's worth getting an expert opinion, when you seem to have more than one problem at once and you want a good solution for both, that's the time to get some help. One other overlap situation I think it's worth flagging is when someone suffers from both rosacea and melasma. That can be tricky in the mid-face because you might be tempted to tackle the melasma with something quite punchy, hydroquinone and retinoids. That might lead to aggravation of the rosacea, where the sensitivity aspects mean that the skin cannot handle that kind of treatment. You might want to tackle the redness with a light-based treatment to improve the appearance of broken vessels, That might antagonize the melasma, where light-based treatment without properly stabilizing the pigment cells, the melanocytes, can lead to worsening of the melasma. So again, seek expert help where there is unusual complexity to your condition. Now, I've just touched on it, but it's worth emphasizing that sensitivity is normal and something that should be factored into any kind of management strategy. There is an inherent tendency towards barrier dysfunction in rosacea, particularly in context of active rosacea. And it's worth bearing this in mind, that your basic skincare is as much part of your routine as any medicated treatments that you might be using. Now, through years of experience, I found that the simpler you go with rosacea, the better. The fewer products, the less ingredients, the more the skin is happy. Now, when thinking about treatment, I think it's important that we recognize that conditions like rosacea, which are in a sense built in, there are strong genetic factors at play, means that once it activates, and that's typically between the ages of 30 and 50, that's when we tend to see rosacea kind of rearing its head, that it's about managing it. It's about knowing your skin type, it's about knowing your triggers, and it's about managing the problem, because most inflammatory diseases behave by basically waxing and waning. So there'll be good spells, there'll be bad spells, and it's all about having the right treatment protocol that you can activate when needed. And that's what gives us peace of mind. It's what gives us confidence that things might go up and down, but we can handle it. Now, coming on to triggers, I would say one of the biggest triggers is the seasonal aspect of rosacea. I have patients where winter is their worst period, and that's because of the challenge of cold air, low in humidity, chafing winds. All of these things can just set off the alarm that is the over-enthusiastic innate immune system in the skin. So challenging weather outside and then coming into dry, centrally heated air. It's that combination that is just really provocative when it comes to those unstable blood vessels that just want to flush up and open up, leading to prolonged flushing. So know how your skin behaves in different seasons. If you're going skiing, factor that in. Similarly, it might be that summertime is your worst offender in terms of the seasons. UVA that we have all year round, but is particularly high in context of summer weather, may also be a major trigger for you. And again, will need to be handled accordingly. And then the final nugget for today is to get cozy with your dietary triggers. I think for me, certainly that's a really big part of how I approach managing it, is that I know that if I drink red wine, and I do love good red wine, I am going to flush. I am going to be pink, and probably pink for quite some time. My skin will be redder the next day. So, you know, I make my choices. If I was doing an event and going to be filmed, I would stay away from red wine. I would drink white wine, or I wouldn't drink at all. So for me, that's probably the way I, consciously think about how I behave when it comes to my skin. Similarly, for spicy food can have the same sort of effect on the skin. I think, that's another thing to be conscious of. Hot drinks can sometimes be provocative just by themselves. Factor in caffeine, might be even worse. Now, these things don't apply to everyone at all. It really is quite subjective, but do the work, kind of explore your triggers, understand how that affects your skin. Because, when you flush up, there's often a sort of a sensory sort of aspect to it too. My skin will feel tingly, might feel a bit tight, active somehow. So at the end of the day, a really practical approach to rosacea I find to be the most effective. Multitasking, bringing together that knowledge about how the condition tends to behave and looking at the things it impacts the most. What we eat, how we manage our skin, how the seasons affect us. And it's with that awareness that we can build a really robust plan that gives us a feeling of control. So I hope that helped you if you've been struggling with rosacea. And please do me a favor, if you know someone with rosacea who isn't doing well, who could do with some guidance, please do share the video and send them to the content that's coming after this. So we're going to be doing a few more videos on this theme to really cover it thoroughly. If you like the video, please hit subscribe and like so I know. and I look forward to seeing you again very soon. Bye for now.